So I rode this basketball. Now, unfortunately, I found out quickly after hopping on that I am not the target demographic for this electric unicycle. So I searched high and low to find the perfect candidate to test this EUC out.
Hey, Dad.
You'll do. They say that if you teach your kids how to ride an electric unicycle, when they grow up, they'll never have enough money to buy drugs. We'll see how that worked out for me. This EUC is for kids, but the review is for adults. This is Wheel Good Time. Let's get started. Hey, thanks for joining me on Wheel Good Time, where today we are going to be reviewing the Kingsong S9 electric unicycle. Before we get started, I want to give a big shout out and thank you to James at Next Gen Mobility for providing this demo unit. Next Gen Mobility is the one and only EUC dealer in the United States that does worldwide shipping and also offers a lowest price guarantee. This is the Kingsong S9. This EUC is designed with kids in mind specifically. This EUC has a 250 watt motor and runs on a 50 volt system with a claimed top speed of 9 miles per hour. It has a battery capacity of 115.4 watt hours, which is just beyond what you're allowed to take on a plane. It has a claimed max range of 7 miles and weighs 18 pounds. It includes a magnetic charger that will charge up the wheel in about 3 hours or so. Kingsong is known for having an RGB display where it's present on pretty much all their EUCs, and of course the S9 is no different. In this case, it's not just for show. It's actually a battery level indicator. So once you activate the wheel, it's going to show you what the battery percentage is as you ride. And as it goes down further and further, there you go. We're fully charged here with all these green lights displaying. Something about the S9 which is particularly unique is the fact that it just has a tire skin. It's not even an inflatable tire. It's relatively simple, but it requires a bit of effort to replace this tire skin whenever it starts to wear down. If you end up buying the S9, I would definitely recommend buying a few extra tire skins just because this center portion does definitely tend to get worn down or dirty really quickly. Kingsong says that the S9 is waterproof, but they don't say what level of waterproofing it has. And on top of that, they don't have anything to back up their claims. So forgive me if I don't really believe them when they say it's waterproof. Because the pedals fold down and out the way that they do, it is impossible to mount any third-party pads on this wheel. But we do have some soft foam here that you can possibly rest your foot against. Because the pedals fold up in the way that they do, it also made it impossible by design to mount any third-party power pads. Is that a fundamental design flaw? Maybe, maybe not. But if you lean too far forward on the S9, there is nothing that would prevent you from hitting the ground. This grip tape is also very easily removable, and so that doesn't really lend a whole lot to my belief in the build quality or sturdiness of this particular EUC. But then again, this is a kid's toy and it's marketed as such. They're not saying that this is a serious mode of transportation that you're going to be taking on the highway at 70 miles an hour. So I'm going to forgive them on that point. It's a toy, and therefore some things are going to break eventually. When I first unboxed the S9, I was a bit perplexed, and it was kicking my butt because I couldn't figure out, why can't I get this thing to open? This has a clever little mechanism where it has a little lever that you just push with your finger and it releases the pedals. You would think that this instruction manual would have told me that, but it didn't. It was nice to have on hand, but it really didn't do me a whole lot of good in this case. Now that I've figured that part out, I just have to turn it on and it's going to self-balance like every other electric unicycle, right? Wrong. So this also was kicking my butt, and I was thinking, I have a defective unit or I'm stupid. It's one or the other. Or maybe both. Anyway, it turns out that this is not covered in the manual either. You press down, and once it detects that it's got weight on it and your feet are flat on it, it will activate. This is actually a pretty cool feature because as you step on it and bring it up, it will self-balance. And the width of the tire makes it pretty easy to be able to just kind of stand there. With most EUCs, you have to have your foot planted on one of the pedals and have the side of your leg pressing up against the wheel. But that's not the case on the S9. In this case, you generally will start by having your feet on there and then pop up and then go. I'm glad that I was able to figure it out by myself, because this instruction manual was useless in telling me how to make this S9 actually balance. Once I did get it to balance, it was time to take it out for a little spin and see how it performed. Let me just be the first to admit that it was rather embarrassing filming myself looking like a baby deer who had just been born trying to ride this EUC. It's a completely different experience. I knew when I hopped on this EUC that I exceeded the max weight limit of 60 kilograms or 132 pounds. This is made for kids. It was extremely easy to overpower this EUC as an adult, and by simply leaning too far forward, I was able to make it cut out. But again, maybe I'm just asking too much from this device that even Kingsong markets as a toy. So let's abandon the adult rider perspective and get a child on it. After all, it's made for them, not for me. After only about 4 days of lessons of learning how to ride on the Bigode A2, Emma was, by all metrics, still a beginner EUC rider. After working on her A2 skills, we switched to learning how to ride an EUC on the S9. It was almost back to square one. While practicing on the S9, we had frequent issues getting the S9 to begin balancing, because with a normal EUC, you generally want to have the side of at least one leg touching the side of the EUC.
With the S9, it's impossible to do that. In fact, the only way to get this EUC to begin balancing is by having both feet flat and applying pressure on the pedals. That wouldn't be a difficult task except for the slightly elevated pedal hinge. That hinge made it difficult to lay both of her feet flat on the pedals and prevented her from using the soft foam on the sides as a power pad.
Once it feels the pressure though, it'll beep to let you know that you're good to go. Rather than starting by moving the EUC forward with one foot, then putting your other foot on there as you're moving, this adopts more of a one-wheel style approach. You put both feet on there and then pop it up and go. The wide profile tire makes the S9 easy to make turns on it. In the negative column, since this isn't a real tire with air in it, you will feel every single irregularity on the ground. Every rock, every bump, and dip are felt. For a learner, that can be a challenge that can throw you off potentially. Going over gravel, Emma got a bit of wobbles over rocks that she wouldn't have otherwise had difficulty with on an EUC with an inflatable tire. This was exacerbated by the fact that she couldn't effectively use the sides of the S9 to dampen those wobbles. Such a waste too, because it has the soft padding on the side, which would be wonderful to use as a means to maintain your balance. But you can't. As far as power is concerned, the S9 is clearly placed in the lower power zone. The 250 watt motor was strong enough to keep Emma upright, and she was able to ride at a decent speed for this little machine. When the confidence begins to build, caution tends to be thrown to the wind. She was regularly hitting beeps at about 6 to 8 miles per hour, with a 20% safety margin. I also had to remind her frequently to respect the beeps, or it will cut out and she will land on her face and possibly be missing a few teeth. The trick when getting started is to keep your foot away from the elevated hinge, which also simultaneously made it hard to maintain that third point of contact on the side of the wheel. The S9 is without a doubt her EUC of choice because she felt it was the easiest to learn on. In conclusion, this EUC is not made for everyone. It's made for kids, and generally the smaller the better, because the less mass that they have, the less likely they are going to be able to overpower this wheel. But given the price point of the S9, this EUC is a very affordable way to get your kids that very first taste into the life of an EUC rider. If you're not sure that your child is going to be as enthusiastically getting into EUCs the way you are, then the S9 is a very cost-effective way to just dip their toe in it to see how well they like it. The S9 is still a toy, and no one's arguing that. This wheel is more of a stepping stone for a child to see how they like it and then possibly move on to something a bit more powerful, because in general, the more headroom that you have, the safer it is. The one design flaw that I see in this wheel is the fact that you are unable to mount any aftermarket pads on it. But if they corrected that and made it so you could mount pads, then you wouldn't be able to do this. Also, the lack of available power on the S9 does make it a bit notoriously easy to cut out, but at least when you do cut out, you're not going to be going at 35 to 55 miles an hour. You're probably only going to be cutting out at around 9 miles an hour. Not a fun experience regardless, but at least it could be worse. With the elevated hinges on the pedals, it does make it rather tough to get your foot right up against the sides here and get your weight up against these foam pads. By doing that, it turns these foam pads from a utilitarian thing more into just an aesthetic thing. The ultra low pedal height does make this wheel very accessible to kids. All they have to do is pop up on it and then they're good to go. You don't necessarily want to be teaching a child how to ride on something with really high pedals because that's just going to make it even a bigger barrier to entry into the world of EUCs. Because this is arguably the lowest priced EUC on the market today, the S9 is going to be one of the easiest and most accessible means of getting your kids into electric unicycles. To be clear, they are likely going to be outgrowing it very soon, and then you're going to be investing in the next thing. But isn't that kind of how it always goes with EUCs? Once again, I want to thank Next Gen Mobility for providing this demo unit and making this video possible. If you're looking to buy the S9 or any other EUC on the market, check out nextgenmobility.org, where you can get $25 off of your next purchase using coupon code WheelGoodTime. If you think the S9 is the most cost-effective way to get your child into EUCs, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. If you think that there's another EUC that would do a better job of it than the S9, hit that subscribe button anyway. Let me know what you think about this wheel in the comments section. That's all for today. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next time.